So this is quite important to me. Limitation, limitlessness. I would call this the architectonic of modernity. It's a kind of like a foundation to modernity itself. To me, this is the telos of democracy, the constant need to jigger and rejigger the system, overcome limitation, whatever it is that we might call it, say an injustice in order to create the justice. And it's through this kind of mechanism that democracy keeps pushing in one direction. But the issue is that it can push in the right or it can push in the left. It's kind of difficult. Who is it? Does the right have particular control over a particular moment, or does the left have control over it? Here is the pursuit of justice in my estimation. The proliferation of justice terms. Social justice, environmental justice, reproductive justice. All of the justice terms that you can possibly imagine. So injustice then is the limitation, and justice is the overcoming of that limitation, and we sometimes call that freedom. So that dynamic between limitation, limitlessness, again, I've tried to push here the notion that this is the juice that gets, democracy moving. All the time, to go back to Antiphon for a second, no truth behind the laws of the state, no natural law of justice. It's the fight. It's the interpretation. You are unjust in one instance, and they can turn it right around and say, no, you are the one that's being unjust. I have lots of stories that I can tell you about that one. So as a result, justice to me is, again, not that divine transcendental thing, but it's a storehouse of social energy. Whatever it is that it can corral, that social energy that kind of pushes things. The problem, I believe, is that democratic rhetorics, they function as God terms. For me, the democratic rhetorics, liberty, freedom, rights, become the sort of God terms. This is a Burkean conceptualization. At least God terms will Burke's conceptualization. I apply it to the democratic rhetorics. I think of them as God terms. They're absolutist terms, they're virtue terms. In other words, they have a sense of unassailability. If I have a cause, and I can link it to freedom, to rights, if I can link it to justice, then I've started to create a kind of unassailable position. I've started to say, I am on the side of the good, the right, the truth of the matter. And so the rush to identify with justice, and if we identify with justice, then by implication, those who don't identify with me become identified with injustice. We're going to get to a lot of this over time in this talk, and we'll see what kind of problems that creates. And then, of course, always waiting in the wings is the other group getting ready to seize their cause and to link it up with justice. So there are things that I personally would not believe in. Justice for the unborn, justice for displaced cold workers. So I'd rather be on the side of justice, environmental justice, for instance. But it's just a matter of time before these other kinds of justice claims occur. And that's my whole point, the antinomic body politic. Located in truth claims, ontological claims, foundational fundamental claims. This is the truth of the matter, and you're not. And that's a breakdown of the word anti-nomos, laws. This comes from a Republican organizer during an interview published in the New York Times. Anyway, here's an example of it. There's a good CNN poll on this that asks, do you think American democracy is under attack? 46% of Democrats said yes, 46% of independents said yes, and a full 66% of Republicans said yes. That's because Republicans labor under the delusion that the 2020 election was stolen. So they are the most concerned about democracy. The people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th thought They were fighting for democracy. So democracy can be kind of an opaque term for voters. Yeah, it's an opaque term for voters. It gets seized by whatever group you want. So who is under attack? Okay, let's deepen this. Oops, not quite yet. Let's deepen this. January 6th, 6 p.m., the riots have occurred, and Donald Trump tweets. Notice the language. These are the things and events that happened when a sacred landslide election victory. Sacred. I mean, we're back into we're back in the train of the God term, the absolutist term, the truth term. So a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. There's a lot in there, but this is my whole point, or this is one of my points certainly, that if you genuinely believed that democracy was taken from you, then you felt that democracy was under attack, but you're saying that from the right wing. On the other hand, the left wing wants us to believe that democracy is under attack from the other kind of perspective. How do we settle that kind of a dispute? Well, I mean, you can always say, well, they were deluded, it was false. But what if you really believed it to be true? What if you foundationally believed it? And this becomes the perplexing sort of thing, I think, that all of us kind of face when we enter into these kinds of problems. I think ultimately what this kind of refers to, Trump was using throughout his campaign, was using the forgotten man trope. So he was reaching into the sense that, all right, you were involved in a sacred cause, but somehow or another you have been disabused, you have been ignored, you have been rejected, you have been forgotten in the liberal imaginary, all right? And what he was reaching for was a politics of grievance. But I would say that the politics of grievance is central to democracy. It's the fuel, again, that drives the democratic advance for both the left and the right. The left has its grievances. Grievance also, in fact, it begins to look like a kind of fundamental right. In other words, that democracy says, you have a grievance, you have a right to your grievance. Because it's your grievance that's going to push us even further towards the truth of whatever it is that democracy is supposed to represent. So grievance becomes the limitation, in my analysis at least, and it compels us to find a limitlessness, a solution, something that will free us of that grievance. And again, I think this is the telos of democracy, to actually grant us the right to have grievances. And that, in a sense, is problematic. On the other hand, it's quite potent.